The kitchen was packed with 20 of my husband's relatives when the silence hit, and it was so loud, it actually made my ears ring. My husband, Ryan, stood there, clutching an empty beer bottle, his face turning a shade of white I'd only ever seen on a Victorian ghost. He hissed, "What did you do?" And I just smiled at him while 20 hungry people stared at our empty, cold stove. Exactly what you told me to do, Ryan. I bought my own food, and apparently, you forgot to buy yours. But to understand how I turned my husband's 35th birthday into the most expensive public humiliation of his life, you have to hear the insult he barked at me 3 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday evening in October. The kind of day where the air feels thin and the sun sets far too early, leaving the kitchen bathed in that depressing, clinical overhead light. My husband sneered that sharp, jagged twist of his lip that usually signaled he was about to make a sport out of making me feel small. "Buy your own food. Stop living off me," he barked. I said nothing. I didn't even flinch. I just stood there as the words hit the floor and shattered. The thing about being humiliated in your own kitchen is that the sound doesn't just disappear. It's not like a TV you can turn off. It bounces off the white subway tile. It soaks into the porous gray grout. And it settles into the floorboards. It stays in the room long after the person who spat the words has walked away to pour himself a glass of filtered water and disappear into the living room to watch football. He acted like nothing happened. Like he hadn't just reached into my chest, stripped away every quiet, invisible sacrifice I'd made for him over the last 3 years, and scattered them across the linoleum for a witness to see. I was standing at the granite island when it happened, my fingers still cold from the grocery run. I'd just come from the Kroger on Millhaven Road, the one with the sticky floors and the flickering lights that always gives me a headache. I had paid for everything myself. My debit card. My hard-earned money. I was looking at $47 in change and a receipt that felt like a heavy weight in my pocket. I started unpacking the essentials. Chicken thighs, rice, pasta, tomatoes, and a bottle of extra virgin olive oil. I'd even grabbed a bar of that dark chocolate Ryan always claimed was too bitter right before he'd secretly polish off the whole thing while I was in the shower. Derek was sitting at the kitchen table, picking at a bowl of leftover pasta. He's Ryan's cousin, 26, and perpetually between things, which meant he'd been taking up space in our guest room since August. He had his head down, shoulders hunched in that specific way people do when they can feel a domestic explosion brewing. Ryan was leaning against the door frame, blocking the path to the hallway, arms crossed. His posture radiated that toxic cocktail of contempt and boredom. It's a look some men get when they've decided you aren't even worth a direct conversation anymore. They talk around you. They perform their grievances for an audience. He looked straight at Derek, ignoring me entirely. "From now on, she can buy her own food," he said, his voice loud enough to vibrate the glassware. "I'm done. She's been living off me long enough." I set the bottle of olive oil down. The glass made a soft clink against the stone. My hands were freakishly steady. I remember staring at my knuckles, waiting for them to shake. But they didn't. Instead, something deep behind my sternum went very, very quiet. It was the kind of silence a town gets right before a Category 5 hurricane makes landfall. Derek didn't look up. Ryan unfolded his arms and waited for the fallout. I knew what he wanted. He wanted the waterworks. He wanted me to get shrill and defensive so he could finally call me hysterical and make me feel even smaller. I looked him right in the eye for a long, agonizing moment. Then, I just nodded once. "Okay," I said. He blinked. "Okay?" "Yes," I replied. "Your rule. I'll follow it." He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. He thought I was pouting. He thought the silent treatment was some weak weapon I was trying to use. He had absolutely no idea that the most dangerous thing you can do to a controlled person is to stop trying to control the situation. When you stop fighting for air and just let the room breathe, the truth starts to seep out of the walls. I was done holding the ceiling up. If he wanted to see what happened when I let go, I was more than happy to show him who was actually keeping this house from collapsing. Ryan walked back into the hallway, his footsteps heavy and arrogant. Derek finally met my eyes for a fraction of a second, a look of pure pity before he ducked back down. I didn't cry. I just folded the grocery bags, tucked them under the sink, and went upstairs to my office to start making a list. Now, you have to understand the depth of the rot to understand why the cure had to be so clinical. I met Ryan when I was 28. He was 31, radiated confidence, and was a master at keeping the other version of himself, the one that viewed people as assets to be managed locked away. We got married when I was 30. By then, I was a senior project coordinator at an architecture firm. My entire professional life was built on preventing six-figure disasters from happening. I was organized to a fault. Competent. Ryan worked in software sales. It was good money, but variable. In those first 12 months, the finances felt like a partnership. Then, the erosion started. It happened with a whisper. He stopped asking about purchases and started announcing them. A set of $600 golf clubs. A weekend fishing trip. A massive TV installed on my side of the bedroom without consulting me. Each purchase was individually dismissible, but together, they built a picture I was too terrified to look at directly. The grocery situation started about a year before that Tuesday. He'd made a comment about how much we were spending on food, about $600 a month. For 2 adults and a live-in cousin, that was incredibly reasonable. I pointed that out, but he just smirked and told me I had expensive taste. The audacity of that comment still makes my blood boil. I was buying store-brand pasta and clearance chicken. I told myself he was just stressed because his sales numbers were down. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because I loved him. I didn't realize yet that it was actually just a high-interest loan I would never stop paying back. By October, I had been footing the bill for almost every grocery run for 8 months straight. Not by agreement, but because if I didn't, the fridge stayed empty. Ryan saw me hauling the bags. He saw the receipts. But he chose the comfortable story where he was the provider and I was the parasite. Fine. If he wanted the truth, I was going to give it to him. In black and white. I sat at my desk and pulled out the household folder. I grabbed a calculator and started the math. I won't bore you with every bunch of kale, but here is the grand total of my freeloading. In 8 months, I had spent $4,218 on groceries. Ryan's financial footprint for the same period? 3 Costco runs totaling $460, mostly beer, paper towels, and frozen appetizers for his friends. I underlined that $4,000 difference 3 times. Then, I flipped to a fresh sheet and started a different kind of list. Ryan had made a rule, and I was going to follow it with a precision that would make a surgeon nervous. That first week, I went to Whole Foods alone and bought a pack of small, round green stickers. Green for mine. Every single item in the refrigerator that I purchased received a sticker. I used blue painter's tape to divide the pantry shelf. I even bought a small chest freezer for the garage to store my bulk items. I made sure to cook for myself every single night. I wasn't going to live off ramen. I was going to eat like a queen while the kingdom crumbled. I made chicken marsala that filled the house with the scent of garlic and wine. On Sunday, I set a slow cooker of beef stew to simmer. I sat at the table with a glass of Cabernet and a book, while Ryan sat 3 feet away peeling the plastic off a soggy gas station sub. He tried to test the boundary twice. First, he reached for my pasta salad, saw the green sticker, and snapped the lid shut without a word. Second, he went for the good olive oil, sighed dramatically when he saw the dot, and settled for a dusty bottle of vegetable oil from the back of the cabinet. He thought this was a phase. He thought I'd eventually crack and hand him a beer while pretending the last month hadn't happened. He had no idea I was an architect. I was 3 weeks into the construction of a reality he had demanded, and I was building it to last. It was a Thursday evening when the plan truly solidified. I was in the bedroom folding my laundry separately, of course, when I heard Ryan on his phone in the kitchen. He wasn't trying to be quiet. You don't lower your voice when you're standing next to a couch, and that's how he saw me. Yeah, Emily's handling all of it, he barked into the phone. The roast, the mac and cheese. You know those honey-glazed carrots she does? Saturday, 6 o'clock sharp, tell everyone. Of course she is. She always does. I smoothed the wrinkles of my shirt with a steady hand. 20 people. His mother Barbara, his brothers, cousins, aunts, Uncle's. His annual birthday dinner, the high-stakes production he treated like a coronation. He expected me to prep for 4 days, spend $500, and perform invisible labor for a man who had officially evicted me from his pantry 3 weeks prior. I walked downstairs, past him, and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. I didn't look up recipes. I started a spreadsheet titled The Rule Follower. I itemized the assumed labor and the current inventory. He wanted the performance of a happy home while ignoring the rules he set the moment they became inconvenient. I clicked save and felt a hard knot of satisfaction. Saturday morning arrived with a cruel, bright sun. The house smelled only of the coffee Ryan had made for himself. "Big day," he chirped, leaning against the island. "You've got everything covered, right?" I didn't look up from my toast. "No," I said. The laugh died a quick death. He set his mug down with a sharp clack. "Emily, my entire family is going to be on that porch in 6 hours. This isn't funny." I pushed my plate away. "I'm not laughing, Ryan. You told me to buy my own food. I did that. If it has a green sticker, it belongs to me, and none of it is going on that table tonight. I've honored your rule for 21 days. Did you think I was kidding?" Panic rolled in like fog. He grabbed his phone and started calling every catering hall in a 20-mile radius. But it was football season and Halloween weekend. Every "sorry, we're booked" hit him like a physical blow. By noon, he had secured nothing but a maybe for a partial pasta order. At 12:30, he found me in the living room. "You did this on purpose," he hissed. I set my book down. "I followed your rule, Ryan." "Was that on purpose?" "Yes. Just like you chose to humiliate me in front of Derek on purpose. I have 8 months of itemized receipts in my office if you want to pass them around with the appetizers tonight." He stood in the doorway, the arrogant provider reduced to a man who couldn't even put a bag of chips on the table. "I need you to help me fix this," he said, his voice finally breaking. I just picked my book back up. "I know you do." 5 o'clock hit like a starting gun. The doorbell rang at 5:30. Barbara arrived first with a green bean casserole. Then the rest of the clan swarmed in, brothers, wives, and 4 children, treating my hallway like a track field. Aunt Linda bustled in, sniffing the air. "Is that the roast? I've been thinking about those carrots all day." I adjusted my gray sweater. The lie was so deep their brains were inventing smells that didn't exist. The air was crisp, clean, and devastatingly vacant. The stove was cold glass. The only thing on the granite was a bowl of decorative gourds. Linda pushed open the kitchen door and stopped so abruptly Barbara almost ran into her. The silence radiated outward, killing every conversation in sequence until the house was vacuum sealed. Barbara stepped into the kitchen doorway, her brow furrowed. "Ryan? What is going on? Where is the dinner?" Ryan stood by the fridge, caught in high beams. He forced a brittle laugh. "There's been a misunderstanding, Ma. No big deal." "No," I said, finally standing up. Every head snapped toward me. I kept my voice level and dangerously clear. 3 weeks ago, Ryan told me loud enough for his cousin to hear to buy my own food and stop living off him. So, I listened. Every item I paid for has a green sticker on it. I've spent 21 days eating my own meals. I didn't spend a single cent on this dinner because, according to the host, I'm not allowed to use the shared resources anymore. I let that sink in. I have 8 months of receipts in the office if anyone wants to see what $4,000 of living off him looks like. But tonight, I'm just a guest who wasn't invited to the budget meeting. Derek cleared his throat from the entryway. "He said it," Derek muttered. "I was there." He told her to buy her own food. Barbara's face settled into stone-cold recognition. She looked at her son. "Ryan, is that true? Did you actually say those words to your wife?" "It was one argument, Ma. I didn't think she'd actually—" "You invited 20 people to your wife's home," Barbara interrupted, her words like lead weights. "After telling her she was a burden? And then you expected her to cook anyway?" The air left the house. Marcus, Ryan's older brother, let out a long whistle of embarrassment. "Man," Marcus said to the empty air. "Just order the damn pizzas and apologize. You're lucky she's even letting us stay in the house." Ryan spent $432 that night on rush delivery and Saturday night surcharges. The food arrived in pathetic stages: lukewarm penne and wilted salad. Everyone ate off paper plates while the conversation stayed hushed and deliberate. Before the first box was opened, Barbara pulled me aside. "I should have been paying closer attention, Emily. I'm sorry. I felt the cold wood of the banister." "You don't have to apologize for him, Barbara." She shook her head. "I'm not apologizing for him. I'm apologizing for not asking you how you were sooner. You've been making these dinners for 4 years, and I've sat at your table every single time. I should have said something before it got to this." She wasn't wrong. Neutrality is just a slow-motion form of choosing a side. After the relatives trickled out with their paper plates, the house collapsed into silence. Ryan stood in the kitchen surrounded by soggy cardboard. "Was all of this really necessary?" he asked. His eyes rimmed with red. "I thought about the $4,000. I thought about the Tuesday evenings at Kroger, my arms aching from bags, choosing the chicken on sale for a man who didn't think I contributed anything. I thought about every morning I'd refilled the coffee before his alarm went off. Gripping my car keys, I didn't give him a second glance. 'You told me to stop living off you,' I said. So I did. That was 14 months ago. We ended up in 3 sessions of counseling with Dr. Marlene Fossey. In the second session, Ryan sighed and said, 'She's always been so dramatic about the small stuff.' Dr. Fossey didn't even blink. 'Ryan, dramatic people don't keep 8 months of itemized receipts. That's not drama, that's documentation.' She asked him to list what I contributed. He started with his income. She waited. He sat there in that plush office and realized he didn't even know how the toilet paper appeared on the roll. We didn't go to a 4th session. Not because it failed, but because it worked too well. It showed us the foundation had been rotten from the start. I moved out in December. I found an apartment on the east side, 2nd floor, massive windows, and a kitchen with enough counter space to feed an army, though I only cook for one now. I made chicken marsala on my first night there. I ate it alone at the same wooden table Ryan always said took up too much space. The silence didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a life that finally made sense. Derek texted me a few weeks after the papers were signed. "You deserved better. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." Barbara still sends me cards. The filing cabinet with those receipts is in my new closet. They served their purpose. They were the proof I needed when I started to doubt my own reality. I was telling a friend about the saga recently. She asked if I ever regretted how I handled it. I looked at the light reflecting off my mug. "No," I said. If I'd yelled, he would have called me crazy. If I'd cried, he would have called it manipulation. If I'd laid out the evidence calmly, he would have called it dramatic. I took a sip of my coffee. The only language he couldn't argue with was his own. I just gave him exactly what he asked for. "Down to the last sticker," I said. And for the first time, I meant it.